I'm very excited to be asked to come here and talk a little bit about some of the other elements that go into producing games, which for me mainly is around how do you get teams motivated and how do you develop the skill sets that are required in order to get teams to bond well together, to work well as a team, and to be able to lead teams. So I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by two people that I know are absolute advocates for this subject matter. So Zsuzsa from Wushu Studios and Becky from Supermassive Games. Before, I guess, I do a little bit of an introduction about what I do. Zsuzsa, do you want to go first and just do a little bit of an introduction about yourself, about the studio, about your background in terms of people and the sort of operational side that you support?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here and thanks for the invite to be part of this panel. As Andy said, my name is Zsuzsa. I'm the head of people and culture at Wushu Studios. I've joined Wushu 2.5 years and probably stopped counting a while back now. I definitely feel like part of the furniture for a while now. And prior to Wushu, I've actually not worked in games. I've had a bit of a gig in tech and the healthcare sector mainly and hospitality sector. So a bit of everything for the past 15 years or so. My huge passion, as Andy would know, is line management and people manager development. Hugely important, I think, for everything what we do. In terms of our people function as well, everything that we do is to support people who are making the games. So this is where I sit and have worked with Andy on our own leadership program as well at Wushu. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And Becky?
Hi, yeah, but actually very similar background to Zsuzsa. So I've been in HR for about 15 years. Prior to that, was in recruitment for quite a while. Background really pre-Supermassive, being very much financial services and tech. And then, yeah, Supermassive was my first role in the industry. And I've been here for about 3.5 years now. So yeah, similar, feel like, you know, sometimes I consider myself still a bit of a newbie to the industry, and other times think, no, I've got it, I've got a good sense. But yeah, I mean, really, the studio's only really had kind of an HR function, an established HR function for the last 3.5 years. So it's still fairly new in a sense, but you know, we're doing a lot of work around, as you said, Zsuzsa, people development, manager support, and culture, really trying to kind of just focus on that culture piece and making sure that that's kind of spread through everything we do.
And I think that's the important thing to start to recognize is so many different studios do this piece slightly differently. I always I'm interested about the way that people sort of position themselves in terms of their roles. I know Becky, you sort of HR of that perspective, and usually very much on people and culture. But actually, you tend to find that you're both doing very similar jobs, doing very similar roles. So from my perspective, I run something called Game Studio Training. I support studios and all the periphery organizations as well to help them with their people skills. Now, I like to say people skills, and I know this is titled, you know, why are soft skills anything but? Because I think it's really important to look at what do we mean by sort of soft skills versus hard skills. Hard skills are typically the sort of technical skills that you can probably measure. You can send people on courses. You can see how they're getting better at the development of the game, or the processing of a particular thing, or the number of hours that they can develop something in. It gets quicker and quicker. Those are sort of typically the hard skills. But the other skills, and I think soft definitely downplays them, are all the skills that are involved in supporting that to happen. You know, they're the bits that really are the glue that glues the team together in terms of the empathy, the communication skills, and the leadership skills. Although I did hear another way of phrasing them when I went to Guildford Games, not this year, but the year before, from Nikki at Stellar Entertainment. She calls them power skills, which I think is a great reframe on the skills as well. So I think if we could just across the line, just get rid of soft skills now and call them power skills, I think that would work really well. So Zsuzsa, I've got a few questions that we sort of that we were going to just sort of run through. So in terms of you know, game production is quite high pressure. There's a lot involved with it. Why do you think things like communication skills and empathy, conflict resolution, like why are those so important when it comes to and maybe just as critical as the sort of technical skills that studios need and the people within the teams need?
So I think that there's so many layers to this, and a lot of people, I think the mistakes happen when people take these things for granted. Sure, I can communicate. Well, sure, but it's really about the how. And I think people need to remember that nobody can read what's on your mind. So if you don't communicate, they're not going to know what the issue is. And especially when you're making games and collaborating in the team within your own discipline, but across different disciplines as well, actually expressing problems, tasks, whatever needs to be done is important. And most important is the how, which is where it all links in with the empathy and any kind of conflict resolutions, because there will be creative differences and it's okay to have them. Otherwise, nothing will progress to another level to be better. So I always say that this is why it's so important to train people and coach people on a one-to-one or have wider training for those power skills. I'm going to use that term now going forward, because it's about teaching, educating people on the how and getting them to have that sort of self-awareness of how they are doing things now, what can be better, how they are being perceived. I know, we probably will touch on this later on, but working remotely makes it even harder when you don't see people and all you go by is writing and you have to interpret something and you might read something that somebody wrote in a different, emotional state. And you have to be really mindful of how you're being perceived. And this is something where you can try and educate people on these trainings a bit to be more aware.
Yeah, that's definitely sure there. I mean, people say, "Oh, I've done my communication. I sent that Slack message off, or I sent an email, or I sent whatever." And we know in interpersonal communication, the words themselves are only a very tiny bit of communication. Because if you've lost the tonality, as in you haven't even heard how something's phrased, and you've lost the body language that goes with it, there's so much of communication which is non-verbal that it's really important to try and make sure that you're communicating in a way that the other person can best understand. And that's even more important when you're remote as well, that's for sure. And Becky, how about for you? What do you think some of the impact of poor interpersonal skills or the ability for people to not build those kind of cohesive communication relationships? What are some of the downsides, or what are some of the things that might happen if that were the case? Maybe you've seen in previous companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just things take longer, or they are less effective, or you just don't have a healthy team. You see the turnover, you see, I think just kind of building on what Zsuzsa was saying there, people think, well, I can communicate, that's fine. But what is communication? You touched on some of it there, but then there's, what you're saying, how you're saying it, the format you're saying it in, when you're communicating. And then, similar with conflict resolution, people sometimes shy away from conflict, but conflict is inevitable. You can have healthy conflict. You shouldn't not go into conflict situations. You should go into that openly, ready for it, but in a good, positive way. So I think not having all of those things, or having them all poorly, you don't have a cohesive team. You ultimately end up having to go around in circles, iterate way more than you would have done, because you've just either been spending all your time having unhealthy conflict rather than moving forward, or having misunderstandings through lack of communication or lack of empathy. So you've not got a healthy team. Things take longer. You end up with a lower quality product potentially as a result, or maybe you have a good quality product, but the damage that you've gone through to get there with all of these poor power skills, it's all round not healthy.
Yeah.
They're just as critical, I would say. Yeah,
definitely. And it's so important when you're working in distributed teams, and when you're working, particularly if you're not even sat down with a person who's ordered the thing. I mean, I guess at Wushu, you're a co-dev studio, so you're working with clients on behalf of the thing, and you're slightly removed even from maybe the original strategic meeting part about it, and you're being given a task job part of the component that you're developing on behalf of another studio. I guess there must be strategies that you've developed within teams to make sure that you don't spend, because I've certainly heard stories of other co-dev studios where they've gone off and developed what they thought was asked for, and then they've gone all the way down the line months later, and it's like, this isn't what I asked for, because what they had in their head was completely different to what the other person had in their head. So it must be really important to make sure you tie down specifications and specific instructions so that you'll have that at least some common aim in mind.
Yeah, and absolutely, you're completely right on that. And just accepting the fact that it will still happen, that there's misunderstanding, and that's okay. The sooner, it's uncovered, the best. And I think it's about creating a culture where people feel safe speaking up and say, hang on, I don't really get this, or I'm not sure this is the way we should go. I have a different idea how to approach this. So this is our role, or part of it is our role, and everybody else as well in the studio, to ensure there is a culture of safety, that people can do that, so they're not scared to speak up. But there will be situations where there are misunderstanding. There are lots of safety nets in place, daily scrums, regular, weekly meetings with the clients, without the clients also. So there's different ways to do it, but yet there still will be misunderstandings. It's about addressing them at the right time, so time isn't wasted, working on something that will not be needed.
And it's also, I think, giving people the resilience to be able to cope. If somebody says, I don't like your idea, sometimes people can take that very personally. It's like they're saying, I don't like you. And sometimes when you're giving feedback, or when you're having conversations, and sometimes difficult conversations, it's helping the team to recognize that discussions don't have to end, and disagreements don't have to end up in conflict. So often, once the emotion starts to get involved, or people start taking things very personally, things can escalate a lot within a conversation.
Can I just
Zsuzsa, Zsuzsa, and then we'll come on to you, Becky, to answer that one.
just on that even just saying I don't like your idea, I think that's another bit that we'll need to teach people about how to express that, because maybe saying I don't like your idea is actually quite confrontational. We have developed a little fact sheet or tool and training for people about how to provide peer feedback to be more constructive, so that we try and take away the emotion side of things, which is easier said than done, but at least it takes practice as everything.
But as soon as you start saying like is an emotive word, so as soon as you start bringing the emotive words in and make it less about evidence and less about the other parts of it, then it does start to become emotive, doesn't it? So Becky, you were gonna come in on that one as well.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I think the other challenge is that sometimes people when confronted with, this is going to be difficult feedback, or I don't know how to give this constructively, they just don't give it at all. And then that's just as damaging. I think people do it from a good place, thinking, I don't want to hurt their feelings, it's better if they just never know, and I'll just fix this myself, or I'll deal with it in a different way. And then that's just not helping anyone. So it's giving people those skills to know, okay, how can I actually move forward with this, or know that it's okay to take the time, taking just a little bit more time to rather than just go, nah, sorry, I don't like your idea, move on. Because sometimes that's valid, that's okay. It's okay sometimes in a creative leadership role perhaps to be like, look, we haven't got time, no, I don't like the idea. But then just taking a few moments more to give some context and something constructive around it, so that person doesn't feel completely crushed and demotivated, is so valuable. That avoiding it can be just as damaging. Is my point.
And I think this is the piece around, is the culture has to be there in order to have those kind of conversations. So I know there are a number of L&D HR people joining here. I can see through the list of names that I definitely know work in those roles within studios. So what do you think is your role, is your job within the studio to help to promote that culture, so that people can have those difficult conversations, they can have trust in each other, to because without trust, people don't feel psychologically safe, they can't have those kind of conversations. What role do you think you and your teams play in order to make sure that studios can have those kind of conversations moving forward? Zsuzsa, I'll come to you first.
That's fine. So I think hugely important is setting the tone. And I've definitely experienced that over the years in my field, and how it actually how it has evolved over the years as well, setting the right tone for people. It's a very different tone that it was 10 years ago when I started in my field, which is probably better. It's more human and people focused now. And making sure that policies and processes and anything like that that are in place are not rigid, and in terms of the outdated standards perhaps, and then just consider the people in the process. So what we've done, one of the first things we've done was revamping how our policies are worded so it's easier for people to understand, creating processes, using systems and different software, which makes things easier for people so they don't feel that HR or the people side of things is a burden on people, because we are a support function. They can rely on us for help, and they should be. So it's all about going back on the setting the zone and just making sure that when it comes to our own values, everything we do is aligned with our values, and it's on the day to day. They see it firsthand, how we deal with people, how we deal with problems, how we handle ourselves on meetings. And this is why, the importance of people managers always come in. They are the role models for everyone as well. So as HR and people professionals, we should making sure that the people managers, the leads, know what they're doing and how they present themselves, because it will, it's from the top down, I always say.
Yeah, the team will behave how the team above them behave. And so it's very important that the right kind of trickle is happening to support the workplace, having that kind of culture as well. And Becky, how do you feel you and your team support that role of culture at Supermassive?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just say, what you just said, but a lot of the same. So I won't repeat all the same things, but I suppose kind of adding to those, it's being there with the managers, with the leaders, with the execs at all levels, because exactly as you said, Zsuzsa, it comes from the top, right? So it's only going to be, I think I can't remember who the saying was from, but the culture is set by the worst behavior that you tolerate. I've probably completely butchered that, but something like that, right? So I think part of our role is just helping people and managers feel brave enough to call it out, to know what they're looking for, to recognize it, but then also to display the right behaviors themselves, to be the right role model, to be the right influence. And I guess kind of leading on from what you said, there's, having the support and the training for managers, not just, training on here's this policy, here's how you do it, here's the steps, here's the wiggle room, here's the whatever, giving them actual hands-on help with it, how, in real life, how to practically go through with this. Yes, that's what the policy says, but that's not what sort of people process we have. It's not just the policy. This is the human side. This is how we would approach this. And sometimes it is bringing in those things like, this is how we can make this a bit more compassionate, a bit more empathetic, or all those sorts of things. So I don't want to say holding their hands, because that sounds really patronizing, but it's being there hands-on with the managers and the leaders to support them in all of these things, to show them that we're here as support, not just, HR saying policy says and you must follow these rules, because that's not what it's about. And then through every interaction that we have, bit by bit, that, people start, they get that, and then they roll that out for next time. But I think, it's being there as that kind of, whilst the values are owned by the studio, I see part of our role as being almost the caretakers for that, the ambassadors for that, being the ones that go, well, hang on, actually, and, does this really fit with what, the way we should be doing things? How about we do this slightly differently? And being someone that goes, well, actually, and that can look like all sorts of different things. But
and sort of carrying on from that, I think I love that being the ambassadors for it, and acknowledging, of course, skills take time to learn. I often talk about this on my training sessions. Basically, learning is knowledge plus experience. So no matter how many times you go on a course about something, or get a concept of something, read a book about something, you've still got to go off and use it. And that's really where the learning happens, is when you're having that first difficult conversation that maybe you've not had before. When you're doing your first performance review with a team member, maybe you've got to have a conversation with them that you're not looking forward to, because you know that they're after X, and yet you don't quite see that they're at that point in time, and no matter what other feedback things you've had along the line, you know they're probably going to try and ask for a pay rise. It's all of those kind of things where until you have those kind of conversations, then you're not really going to get the practice, which is why it's so important to be able to come to your teams and go, I just want to chat this through, or I just want to get your opinion on it. That's what you're there for, is to support people, not to just be the hander out of processes, or the onboarder of people, or the bit that takes over, when the talent acquisition team have gone and found people. It's so much more that you and the team do that enable people to build this kind of skill sets as well. And whilst I've got you there, Becky, sort of replying to this one, how important do you think culture is to being able to acquire and retain talent as well? I know we've got a couple of talent acquisition people on there. I can see a couple there from Wushu on the call. And I guess one of the things that people are really looking for is to be able to join studios that have a good culture, that have a culture that's supportive of their learning environment. How important do you think that is in order to attract and retain good talent?
Yeah, massively. I mean, massively. It can be very easy, I think, when talking about culture, to kind of look at the face value things. What's the office like? What's the environment like? What's the social side? The kind of I won't say fluffy stuff, but the easy things to do in culture. Really, it is how you actually live the policies and the way you handle situations and how everybody communicates. It's massively important, because the attracting people can be that, look at us, woo, we're like this, and then you get them in the door, and then it can be very quick to see, oh, actually this is not the culture that I thought it was going to be. So you have to have it embedded in everything you do, and that is through things like policies, but like Zsuzsa was saying, how they're written, even their style, their tone of voice, and then how they're actually put into place, and how managers share and communicate those, and how everything happens, how the studio operates from top down. That has to be visible, and it's not always easy to kind of put your finger on it and go, our culture is this, because if you could summarize it in a sentence, maybe it's too simple. I don't know. I think you should feel it. You should feel it and just know it. And it's a massive thing. It's a massive thing. It's not a quick fix. It takes time, and it takes practice and attention. And I think if I can add to that, because I'll forget otherwise from my brain, sorry. I think going back to the power skills versus hard skills, I think we said that they were just as critical as technical, and I think they are, but I think actually more attention and more weight needs to be given to the power skills, because they, you can practice and practice and practice, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do them as effectively all the time. It's not like riding a bike. You can't just pick them up and put them down and you automatically know how to do them once you've practiced enough. Anything can derail you. If you've had a bad day, your emotions are all over the place, you're a bit stressed, a bit tired, you might be the most naturally empathetic person in the world, and then for personal reasons yourself, something means that actually you aren't able to do that in the right way. Some interactions, so they need constant attention, constant focus, and that makes them actually harder, I think, than the technical skills. Right, unrelated point, but I had to get that on my head.
Yeah, definitely. And Zsuzsa, how about you in terms of talent acquisition and retention? And I'm just going to mention for those that have joined a bit later on as well, if you've got questions for Zsuzsa or Becky or myself, do put them in the chat, or you can pop them into the Q&A if you want them to be an anonymous question as well. So this is, as interactive as you want to make it as well. So if you've got questions, I've got plenty, by the way. But if you do have questions, you'd like your questions asked, please do remember to put them in the chat as well. So yeah, Zsuzsa, back to you about the talent. It's all about the talent.
All about the talent. I mean, Becky has, again, not wanting to repeat what Becky said, but completely agree with everything 100%. I always say, when it comes to talent acquisition, just afterwards, just do what you said on the tin. Essentially, if you say this is what we are to get people in the door, just be like that. It's simple as that. Just be what you sell, and we definitely are. Like I've felt exactly the same as I walked through the door 2.5 years ago. Well, the remote door, because I've been working from home. at Wushu, and I think that is the key, hiring for those values and being, having the guts to turn people away if they don't match your values, if they don't appreciate or they don't agree with, they don't align with you at all, because that will cause problem later on. Technical skills, you can practice more, you can get better, and there are different kind of training sets, but soft skills, power skills are, take time to hone, definitely. And providing people with the opportunity to interact with their team, that project leads right from day one. So they start to feel what it's like, they start to embed into the workplace from day one, have a proper induction plan for them, when it comes to the project side of things, but also to the business side of things. And when it comes to reviews, even probations and everything like that, it is a two-way street. Just listening to their feedback is super important. And we have implemented this as well. Like, we're trying to get people after their first 3 months to talk about their onboarding experience. This is how we learn. What did they miss? What could we do better? And it's all part of who we are. We want to listen to people's thoughts so we can make things better, because it might be straightforward for us, but it might not be for others because they don't do the HR work. We do that. So it's little things like that, and also like having different kind of training. Like we were very lucky to have Andy to do the leadership development program last year. But then, do you have an L&D department? If so, then, do your own workshops internally. Like we're working on a different kind of communication workshop at the moment as well for our people. But if you don't have the capacity, then, seek out those partnerships like we did with Andy, and try and get that help. Is definitely worthwhile. And, we had huge feedback from everyone. People asked for that. So, all the people we worked with as well, they have continued to ask for all those soft skill, power skills trainings as well, which is just super important. So there are different ways to do them. There are lots of online events as well, like this, that people can get involved and learn a bit more too.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing. It's not just about going and running a program, and so much of the or going on a training day or reading a book or whatever it happens to be, so much of it is about what happens later, getting little groups together, practicing the stuff that you've learned. Because Becky, you mentioned earlier, you kind of use it or lose it type mentality when it comes to this stuff. And of course, maybe what you learned on a course you went on 6 months ago, a year ago, will now apply. But you've not used it before because it didn't yet apply because of the role that you were in at the time as well. And so it's really important that when you're investing in training, fantastic, and how you're going to make sure the training keeps sticking, and the use of it keeps sticking. Now, some of it will be day-to-day use, hopefully, and other aspects might be things that they haven't yet done and yet might have coming up. So how can you refresh things and looking at with training programs that I'm looking at the moment, how can you keep the stickiness going and looking to develop ways of having interactions and practicing these things that don't involve having to get somebody back in every time to redo the whole course, because I think that's really important, that studios can take ownership of this stuff and do it themselves, either because they've got internal capacity, or because they've got some other mechanism for giving people a place to be able to practice on as well. And I think that's really important from that point of view. Zsuzsa, I mean, we should do things slightly different. You talked about people managers earlier, didn't you? So you do have some people managers where they're not necessarily doing the job, but their role is to just manage. And also you have a slightly different way that you approach the term lead on teams. Lead doesn't just mean senior from the Wushu perspective, does it? So how do people step into kind of leading roles at Wushu?
So we call them like an armband. To be a lead, you're like wearing an armband as a lead. So, and it's your choice. It's an opportunity for people to try themselves out and how it works. And I remember the first time I was a lead, in a different setting in hospitality, and I was told by my manager that's the hardest step you will ever take. Because you're not one of, everyone else. You're not one of the team anymore. You're somebody else. You're sort of telling them how to do things. And I completely agree with that. So having leadership, being a lead as an armband is a good opportunity for people to test their wings And if they don't like it, they don't have to do it in the future. So it isn't a permanent solution for them, essentially. In terms of how they learn, so, this is where like we wouldn't necessarily ask them to do annual performance reviews, but they would get involved with one-to-ones and kind of start small and do those kind of support for team members on a one-to-one basis, as their line manager would do the support in terms of their coaching and provide them with all the advice they need so they can practice that with their team members as well. But also we include them with everything that we do when it comes to sessions that we run throughout the year. So in preparation for the performance reviews, because they might get involved doing different kinds of training. They attended the leadership development program. So we include them with everything that we do for people managers who don't do the day-to-day job as well. And I think how Becky, you said it before, it's not about holding their hand, but sort of it is. So we're there with them throughout the journey. Whatever comes up, they know to come to us, and then we're guiding them through any kind of situation and problems. It's about for them to know at what point should I go and ask for help as well. And it's that journey that it takes some time. I would always say that you start small, you start having one-to-one with one team member, and then slowly kind of build up if it's possible.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I know we were all kind of thrown into things. I'm not sure which is the better. Maybe it depends on who you are, and some people might like that better. I think it's about catering for that as well, but providing an opportunity for people to step up and practice those skills. I think that's essential, but with the right support in place for those leads is what's important.
Definitely. And leadership, as a skill set, that's definitely a big passion of mine. So how do you perceive that the skill of leadership is really important when leading diverse personalities and different disciplines that maybe might come under, because of course some of the people watching here, they don't necessarily work at studios as large as Wushu or Supermassive. There might be indies, and so they're managing smaller and very diverse teams. What do you think effective leadership really needs from working in a studio's perspective, Becky?
I think it's leadership, I guess, is its own power skill, but to be a good leader, you have to have a good toolkit of a lot of the other power skills. Sorry, I keep stumbling over that, but now soft skills. Because exactly as you said there, when you've got the cross disciplines, creative differences, also in this industry from compared to other industries I've worked in, given the nature of what people are doing, everyone is super passionate about what they do, which is good. It's a good thing. But like you said earlier, Andy, when somebody gets feedback about an idea and somebody doesn't like it, they can take it personally because it's their thing, it's their passion, it's their baby that they've created. So that can mean that conflict is more of a thing, right? But I think to then be a good leader, you need to have much better, much stronger skills, I would say, in the power of listening, feedback, communication. You've got to understand different perspectives. I can't remember who to attribute this quote to, but it's the don't listen just to reply, listen to understand. And that is so important. So many people, any level, any discipline, but it's important even more so not to do it in leadership, is don't just sit there and hear what they're saying, actually take it on board and listen, and don't just reply with what you think immediately. Understand where they're coming from, because things like creative differences, turning that from a unhealthy conflict to a healthy conflict is because you're actually understanding what each other is trying to achieve, rather than just going, no, sorry, you can't do that, that won't work, or I can't create it, or can't design it like that because it won't work. What actually are we trying to achieve? How can we help each other do that in the best way, bearing in mind both of our limitations or skills, expertise, boundaries, whatever it is. And I think leaders having that as a core strength, not only then do they make sure they're doing that themselves, they then help to kind of encourage, enforce, demonstrate that to the rest of the teams. And when you've got teams doing that across the board, I think understanding each other's perspectives is so, so important, and it's like a superpower skill, because that just wanting and trying to understand others' points of view, it leads nicely to all the other things. You might not necessarily, have the best communication skills, but if you're trying to understand, you'll get there. So yeah, but I might have gone a little bit off piece there. Sorry about that.
That's right. No, absolutely. And Zsuzsa, for you, what else do you think leadership encompasses on top of what Becky said?
Oh, I mean, so what I was always thinking of is that, one size doesn't actually fit all. So as leaders, people need to adapt their style and the interpersonal skills to everyone in their team. It's like a juggler, and they're juggling different balls. It's actually quite hard. It comes natural after a while. It doesn't mean you get it right all the time, but the sooner people start it in their leadership journey, the easier and better it becomes as the team grows, essentially. Using all the things, Becky, you said about people's perspective and the active listening. As a leader, providing people with the opportunity to have that safe space to do that. So team bonding, team building opportunities, retrospectives, I call them review and reflection in our team, where we can actually talk more about our perspectives and what I've taken away from the last month. What is my takeaway? What is my learning curve? And honestly, regardless of why we started the review and reflection sessions about a year and a half ago now, it has evolved to something more that we know each other more and more every time we do this, because we understand a little bit of everyone, a bit more of, oh, okay, I wouldn't have thought that was the issue for you last month. So as a leader, trying to get people to provide those opportunities for those discussions, but also to collaborate, on a different level. There's so many team building tools as well to use. So that would be probably my suggestion as well for people to do.
And people typically start off communicating in their style, their preference, how they like to be communicated to, because of course that's your model, your way of doing communication. But it might be that for one member of the team, you're better off actually seeing them face to face if you can have that chat, sitting down with that person with a coffee if you're lucky enough to be able to work with them in the same place. For somebody else, it might be carving out a bit of time, but doing it in the morning before they're in overwhelm. For somebody else, it might be picking up the phone and speaking to them. Somebody else, it might be you send them a load of detailed information beforehand so they can feel that they are prepared for the conversation, and then you have the chat. So as you start to get to know each person, then you start to be able to understand how best to be able to work with, lead and support that person. I absolutely agree. Communication skills, emotional intelligence, all the other bits. I'm going to very much plug my book, which did come out 2 months ago, which is called Leadership as a Skill. So, you've got yours there as well. Thank you very much.
I didn't bring it.
Because I truly do believe that leadership is something that can be learnt. Our models of leadership tend to be the leaders that we've had in our lives so far, for better and worse, sometimes as well. So I do truly believe that leadership, like everything else, is something that you can definitely get better at. And something that develops as you and your studio or as your team start to get maybe bigger and bigger. Because typically, and this is the interesting thing about maybe games environment versus other professions or other industries, is sometimes people can end up with quite a big team at quite an inexperienced leadership level. Because let's face it, like somewhere like healthcare, you tend to start off as a junior, and then you get a bit more experience, and you become maybe a practitioner or something, and then you gain some more experience, and you become a senior practitioner, and then you become something, you kind of go up through the ranks. Same thing, maybe in banking or in all sorts of sectors, where you start off there and you kind of rise up through the ranks. It can be that half a dozen people have made a game, somebody's given them a potload of money at some point because they found a publisher and they found some financing, they found some backing, and now those 6 fairly inexperienced people leading teams have now got a team of 20, 80, 120, 200, 400 now working for them, and they're going, oh my goodness, how do I lead this? And you might have very experienced people around you, and yet still it's entirely possible to lead quite big companies with big resources and big teams, and yet still feel yourself like you're slightly swimming through that, oh my goodness, how do I do this stuff as well? And people don't necessarily have come up through the ranks when it comes to leadership and experience. So in terms of sort of developing the skill set to be able to manage or to scale the way you work with a number of people, because Zsuzsa, I know, for instance, some of your teams, you've got people managers managing dozens and dozens of people, and yet some people will go, I can't cope with having 3 or 4 people in my team. How do you think those sort of people have developed? What sort of skills do you think make them slightly different to be able to manage more people within larger teams?
I'm not sure it's one skill. I think it's
a number of skills. Yes.
Yeah, a combination of all those power skills spiked with incredible organization and time management skills. Yes. I would say. I think it depends. I mean, I don't think it's a seamless process at all. But this is where we come in about creating those processes to make it as seamless. So having one-to-one tools, having performance review tools that are easy to complete. They don't take a lot of time, so they can focus on having the conversation and actively listen to people, and not thinking about, oh my God, I need to fill out this, I need to do that, I need to tell this person. Creating those processes and an environment for them to be able to just focus and listen, but also have a place for them to offload. And that's where we come in, and their managers, but let's say, mostly us, to offload and to help them, again, provide that guidance that they do require. So I think it's a bit of everything. We have talked about what you mentioned a little bit about. We all learn from managers we've had throughout our time as well. I think that's really important for people to remember when they are managing people. When people leave and they don't particularly have a problem with the organization, a lot of people actually tend to leave because of bad management.
Yeah.
And they probably won't say it either. So it's more about having that self-awareness so you can adapt and actually listen to feedback from your team, and actually, create the safe space and say, well, hang on, I'm not perfect either. Tell me if I'm in the wrong, and it's okay for you to tell me to do that. So, a combination of all that, but there isn't one answer.
Yeah. I mean, when you've organizational skills are absolutely definitely required from that point of view, and having the skill set to be able to be approachable, to hear feedback from others as well as the feedback you want to give. And when I started working life, I worked for IBM, and I had a people manager who managed the department. So she wasn't doing the technical skill set aspect, but she was managing the diverse team and the research team that I was in. And she could manage everybody from me as a grad, or not even quite a grad, I was still doing my degree at the time, as a student within the organization, all the way through to the people that basically been at IBM since the dawn of punch cards. And she was able to kind of manage those with the sort of 30 years of experience to me with 6 months of experience, because she was able to adapt her style to suit and to push. And the other thing really, is about learning to be able to delegate and trust the people around you as well. No matter how big or small something is that you're in, you cannot do everything, and you can't. People don't learn unless they're given the space to be able to learn and make mistakes, and hopefully make mistakes in a way that are rectifiable, that are adjustable, that are learning experiences, and not, oh, this mistake's so big to completely derail this thing. But trusting to know that people will make mistakes, and that what do you do about the learning from those, and what do they learn about the next time? We can't change the past. Nothing we can possibly do right now will ever undo anything or any other decision that we've ever made. But we can decide what we want to have happen next, and that, I think, is part of that as well. Becky, have you got any sort of examples you think of where sort of leadership's really helped through sort of high pressure times, that times when it's starting, time's starting to crunch, I'm going to say crunch culture, but, where things are starting to get towards the end, release date's nearly here. How do people motivate their teams, through those points, or when maybe things have been cancelled, or there's been, difficult conversations that needed to be had? And what sort of aspects of leadership or models have you seen that have been really useful during those times?
I think being respectful and honest and open with people is the key thing, really. And I mean, yeah, obviously not going into specifics and stuff, but just generally, I think in those moments of high pressure, it's getting the teams together, having a conversation. I mean, the amount of times I just say, have a conversation. that's the first step normally. But having a conversation with people, being open, being transparent, and doing so in a very respectful way. So, like, you said there about project cancel. That's not good news. So if that were the situation, it's not a good message to deliver. But doing it to explain rationale, reasons why, give them context, give them advance warning so much as possible, let them ask questions. It's that will always make it go much more smoothly. And I think having leadership available for people to speak to is also very, very worthwhile, very valuable, because I don't know if any game studio is really, but we're certainly not hierarchical. You can go and speak to anybody. Our CEO is very open to book a meeting. We'll have a chat. And people need to know that that's okay to do, and they do, and that's good. So yeah, be respectful, be open, be transparent.
Definitely. And we have had a question in on the Q&A. So I'm going to put this one across to either of you two. You can answer, both answer, I guess. So out of 10 people, how many do you feel have the natural talent for people management or leadership? Is it a natural talent, or is it something that can be learnt? Or do people have to be natural born leaders? Do you feel that's the minority of people, or the majority of people have that ability to become leaders? I'm going to go to you, Zsuzsa, because you're unmuted.
So, okay. How many people out of 10? Well, is it the minority? I think it's the minority of people who are natural born leaders, if there is such a thing. I think I would probably phrase it differently and say people who are more keen to develop in that field, to have the personalities of, being able to speak up, or, having those difficult conversations. You can have those different traits. I'm not sure you're born as a leader, because you can have different personality traits and not become one as well. But I definitely think it's more the minority. Can it be learned? To an extent, yes. I do think that there is that element, the gut feeling, the instinct side of things, what Becky said about the culture as well, when you feel it, that will either come with time, or for some people it doesn't come, and that's okay too. And most of those people actually realize that, and then they don't want to be managers afterwards as well, because I've seen that before.
Yeah, and often in studios there is the space to be able to back off from becoming a manager and stay as a principal.
We have that too. Yeah,
exactly, you have that ability, and that's part of your values. Is people do not wish, do not want to be managers of people and want to stay principals, then they're able to within the relevant teams where those things are possible. And I think that's really good for people to have identified that, what, that bit doesn't suit the way I want to be, or doesn't suit my style, or doesn't suit, what I feel I've got the skill set to be able to give. What I really want to be doing is focusing on this thing as well.
But there's also, I could easily think that, well, actually, they would be really good leaders, but they don't want to do it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Becky, how about you? Do you think leadership's a natural born talent, or something that the majority or just the minority can learn?
I think it can be learned. I think, in fact, actually, the point that you just ended on there, Zsuzsa, was, where my head was going, is that, if in this room of 10, you could have some people there who don't consider themselves leaders, but they have all the raw skills there, whether they want it or not. It might be that they know it and they don't want it, but they might also not realize they want it, because they don't realize that's what it is. All of these natural skills that they have actually, if they hone them a little bit better or more, or are put in the right environment to use those in the right way, then actually, yeah, they would be an amazing leader. But they need to understand, recognize, and then be given the opportunity. Conversely, you get some people who really want to be a leader, and all the practice in the world is not going to help that, and so again, you need to help those people recognize where their leadership needs improving, and is that their natural strength or not. Let's play to your strengths, and some people's strengths are just not leadership, and that's okay. But yeah, I mean, can you be born a leader? I think you can be born with and have natural skills that a good leader should have. Whether that translates to actually being a good leader or not, I think, yeah, as you said, it depends very much on personality traits and environment that you're in and wants and desires.
Yeah.
Bit of a vague answer, sorry.
And Zsuzsa, in terms of investing in development of people skills, soft skills, often it's not the highest thing on the training budget. But why do you think it's so important that studios at least look at how can they support their team in developing some of these skills? Is something over the next 9-12 months they were starting to be able to do to put something in place to give their teams that little bit more the ability to communicate better or work better together? Where do you think the good investment, and what return might they see in terms of the synergy within the studio or the development of the game?
Sure. I think there's a few sides to this. I think traditionally, a while ago, let's put it this way, a long while ago, it wasn't really important. And I think for any of those people who have worked a lot in that era, it's harder to change, to realize, well, actually, there's something more here. And, as people professionals, it's really on to us to try and build that business case and explain to leadership why this is important. The other side to it is more where, again, I think this is where we come in, because we're the one listening to the issues from different disciplines, different projects. We're the ones who might be doing investigations. We're the ones who are probably identifying patterns of things that tend to go wrong. And, with the remote world, communication is usually a huge one as well. So it's, again, on to us to say, well, hang on, we have a lot of problems because of this. This is what we could be doing about it. So it's really on us to create that business case of why it is in the business's best interest to reduce those problems. Can you eliminate them? Probably not. We're human beings.
Yeah.
Things will happen, but can we, let's be realistic. We can't say, well, there won't be any turnover if we do this, because that's just not true. People will always move on, and circumstances change, and life happens. But it's more about the reasons why. So if you start to see a pattern, like, collecting exit interview data, if you start to see the pattern of people leaving for, different opportunities where they have the certain training, leadership training, or they become leaders, and so then you have to start thinking, what are we not doing that other companies are doing? You're looking at your mental health related or other kind of sickness absence record, and kind of try and link that in terms of what are we missing there? Do we need to provide more well-being guide for our leads to support the team? So, people with effective leadership and power skills will have an impact on those things. And it's all about equipping our people managers to be able to handle situations like that and to look after their teams. It is, a lot of things have changed post-pandemic as well. I think a lot of things and techniques would have had to be rejigged around, because it doesn't, looking after people and managing people in a remote world is very different from how you do that face to face.
Yeah. We might squeeze that one in at the end, Zsuzsa. Just a quick chat around that. And Becky, how do you think making a game, adds to the ROI of the studio?
I mean, I think it's soft skills, power skills, and across all levels. So leadership, yes, is a fundamental one, and obviously get that right, and that helps loads of things. But it's the skills across the board, discipline and level wise, and I think it's about having it clear what that means, like to help those people who don't naturally have those strong power skills. But also, what does it mean for us? What does good communication look like? Well, that's going to be different perhaps across different studios, different companies. You're going to expect different things in different places. So we've got to make it look clear and obvious to people what it means like for us. So these are our values. These are our behaviors. This is what we expect everyone to demonstrate. How do you demonstrate these? Here's some ways to help you with that. Here's some ways to show you what good looks like. Bearing in mind everyone's different. We don't want carbon copies of each other, but having those diverse perspectives respectfully, in a supportive way, in a safe way, with good leadership, but all linking back to our values. Because again, I think it was a point that Zsuzsa made earlier, is you don't just want highly technical, highly skilled people if they haven't got good power skills. It doesn't they're just as they're as critical as each other. So you have to focus on both of those. I think I've gone off topic slightly, sorry.
That's right, no worries. Just coming a little bit more just back a couple of minutes we've got left. Anything else that you think's an essential in terms of a remote and hybrid working, Zsuzsa? Because you were starting to touch on that you think is an essential little skill set if you were definitely like focus on this area, because you're a bit more remote, I think, than Supermassive in that respect.
Yeah, very remote indeed. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I know you're in Liverpool, but
Well, we have a studio in Liverpool. I'm not. But yeah, so I think it's more about understanding what the challenges are, and it probably is different for every studio. But it's really hard as a leader. It's harder to gauge how your team are when you're remote, to be honest. So it's educating your managers and your leads about the signs and how to effectively do the one-to-ones as well while they're remote. Remote work is hugely amazing, actually. It provides huge opportunities for people to work flexibly with the hours that they want to do. We operate with core hours, for example. The locations for team meetings can be adjusted. There's a studio where you can do them. You can do them online. There are different tools and games to use as well. So it's more about, as a leader, embracing those online tools. I love neural boards and stuff like this. So there are all different kinds of things there that people can use, and allowing people to do the best work in the way that it works for them as well. Remote work allows for that, but again, providing the studio environment is different. And then having training, the opportunity to do training remotely, so you don't have to worry about people having to think about travel time and accommodation and where do I stay, and I have to be away from my family, for example. So providing all those opportunities and trying to really adapt to a remote setup. So we always say we're remote first. So everything we do is a remote setup, and then can be adapted to different ways. But don't skip out your one-to-ones, and maybe do them more regularly that you would do face-to-face, because you're not going to have that face-to-face interaction with somebody when they walk through the door and they say, hang on, they don't look well. So it's actually having those scheduled one-to-ones, and there are certain things I don't negotiate. So I always, we jig them and we move them, but we always have one-to-ones. So, those are non-negotiable for the team. And that goes into what Becky said earlier, is just being available as a leader, and remotely even as more important as ever, because you never know when somebody wants to just chat to you out of a sudden. So be flexible with your time.
Awesome. And talking of time, we have 1 minute left, Becky. Zsuzsa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add just as we finish? No? Fantastic. So, just to finish up, thank you so much for Yuki for running this whole month about insight into games. If you want to connect with me, I'll put some details into the chat. I also run game studio training, so come and find me and talk to me about maybe how I can support you with workshops about communication skills and emotional intelligence and working well together, because that's the passion I love. If people have better days at work, they have better days at home and better days in their life. So I really want to help to support and skill up not just the leaders, but the people that work within high pressure environments, because I think it's so important that people should feel like they can have a good day at work. Any other words to finish on, Leah?
No, I think you covered everything. Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate you taking the reins here. Really made my job a lot easier today. So you're already fulfilling your purpose there.
And thank you to everybody who put questions in, or just interacted, or chatted, or just listened. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us today for this hour, all about why soft skills are anything but.